Hey, it's Adam from Learn Archviz here, and in this video I'm going to continue to add interaction to my latest project by adding template blueprints that can be copied around my scene and added to various different parts of my model to make anything I want interactive. And I'm going to show you how you can create them for yourself to turn your architectural projects into a design that can be changed on the fly by the client, by you, all in real time. It's awesome. But first, let's talk about what we've done so far. Here's the 30-second recap. This project, it started in my head. I designed it directly in 3ds Max while modeling. Then I used Datasmith, which is awesome, to export directly from 3ds Max to Unreal Engine. In Unreal Engine, I started to add landscaping and a bunch of Megascan stuff. Also awesome. In Unreal Engine, I adjusted the lighting to look how I wanted. I set up some cameras and rendered out some stills and also some real-time animations using Lumen. Again, in Unreal Engine, I added basic navigation to the scene, and then I started to add interactions. To me, this became the ultimate Archviz project. It looks visually appealing, but more than that, you can walk around and experience the scene virtually, and you can even change and interact with the environment, change the design in real time as you walk around. I love it. In my opinion, there is simply no better way to convey a design idea that does not yet exist. If you think I'm wrong, let me know in the comments what you think the best way is. But for me, I'm going to continue to make the case in this video that this is a premium way to visualize architecture. And I also think that it's an important method moving forward into the future, and it will just get better and better. But let's take a look at where we're at right now and what UE5 is capable of currently. In a previous video, I showed the basic UI I set up for this project and some basic toggle buttons. I've polished a lot of that up, kept only the essential adjustments in the UI, and turned them into sliders. Check it out. Okay, before we just brush over the sliders and the menu stuff, I want to look behind the scenes so I can show you guys how it's created. If you go to Add, User Interface, Widget Blueprint, that's how you create the basis of a menu. I've already got one here called BP Menu. And in here you typically go into Designer mode. There's also Graph mode. This is where all the code happens. This is where we design our user interface. Not much design going on here, but basically I've taken elements over here and placed them in my menu. And it's basically made up of boxes, buttons that are held within those boxes, and then text within those buttons. And then the other thing we have is sliders. You can see the whole hierarchy over here. But what I want to look at is what happens when we click on a button or slide a slider. So this button here has an event associated with it called onClicked. And you can see if we click on that, we will have an event in our code that runs when we click that button. So let's just look and see what happens when we do that. Upon clicking that button, we go to Get All Actors of a Class, and the class that we are getting here is the BP Foliage Actor, which, by the way, is awesome. It comes with the Megascan trees, and it controls everything about them. So all I have to do is access that thing, and then I can have all the parameters I need to make those trees do whatever I want. In this case, we're trying to make them look like summer. So this gets all BP foliage actors in my scene. There's only one. So it grabs an array of them, but I just grab the first item in the array, which is index number 0. And then that gives me access to all the parameters. So I can set the health of the tree. These are just really just variables associated with this BP foliage actor. I can set the season strength of it. Okay, and that will change the color and the season of the trees right there. It's simple as that. Then I go on to get all the actors of another class. I'm getting all the decals in my scene. But then for each of the ones that I collect in this array here, I am going to check it to see if it has the tag test on it. Obviously, I was just doing some tests there. I had selected all the leaf decals in my scene and put a tag on them called test. So this code is checking to see if it has that tag, and if it does, if that's true, then it goes through all these decals over here that I already collected. It checks them for this. If it has it, then do this, set hidden in game. So that for the summer season turns off all the leaf decals that I have in my scene right there. And then the last thing it does is it goes to this little function I made. A function is just a snippet of blueprint code within a blueprint code. So if I click on this, I actually go deeper into a different set of code. Okay, so it's kind of an organizational thing here. If I'm doing the same thing over and over, I can just make a function of it. And then in my main code, it just looks like this. So you can see this is a function that has an input of density. And we can see where that input goes to when we go into the function. That input follows this green line all the way over to here, which is setting the fog density. The only other thing I have to do is grab the fog in the first place. So again, I'm using get all actors of the class, exponential height fog. In this case, I'm grabbing all the exponential height fog in my scene. Again, it's an array, but there's only one. So I grab the first item in the array and I go to the fog component of that and set its value. Set the fog density value to whatever I input here, which is 0. So for the summer, I turn off the fog. Now you can see that on other buttons that are for different seasons, I have the same function. Again, just grabbing that fog and setting the density here, in this case to 0.05 instead. Okay, so a cool little function I made for the seasons. Now, let's look at the slider real quick. They work slightly differently. Instead of clicking on it, we slide it. So the event here is on value changed. If we go to that, when that slider is changed, and you can see this is the fog density function again. So in this case, instead of hard coding in a number for what we want the density to be, we just link it to the value of that slider. So as we slide the value back and forth and it's changing, it is going in and doing this function, the fog density function, and changing the value of the fog based on whatever we're inputting there. Okay, and on the lights, it's a very similar thing. In this case, we're changing a light under cabinet light. We're grabbing all the rectangular lights. If it has the tag under cabinet light, we are going to set the intensity to whatever the slider is. You can see the green line from the slider going all the way to here and changing the intensity of these lights. Okay, so that's a little bit about the blueprints going on here and how they work. They're not super complicated. If you understand some basic code principles and if you've done some basic blueprints before. If you need to know more about this and this all sounds like a foreign language to you, I suggest checking out my Unreal Engine course with the links below, where I'm going to be, in the upcoming weeks, I'm going to be adding full lectures of all these interaction things and blueprints and all that, so that you can see how to turn your projects into interactive experiences, even if you haven't done any of this kind of stuff before. So it's a little heavy for a YouTube video, but in a course format, we can go a lot deeper and use a lecture format to go deep into this stuff, start from scratch, and show how to build interaction into your scene. So check that out. The price is always very low, and in my opinion, it's kind of a ridiculous value. I should probably raise the price. But anyway, grab it in the links below while I'm still stupid enough to give it away for its current price. Okay, and remember, if you're not ready for a course yet, that is okay. I give away a lot of free information here on this channel, as hopefully you've seen in this video. So if that is true, if you find what I'm sharing valuable, please do me a favor and subscribe to the channel and like the video. That lets me know that it's good content. It lets the algorithm know so that other people can find the content, and it enables me to continue making more videos. So if you want to know more about this project, I have many plans to share information here on YouTube. Subscribe so I know that you're into it. Now let's get back to this specific project and talk about the next element of interaction that I added to it. I also added some template blueprints for changing materials in real time by the end user. Yes, even the client can walk through and choose the material that they want on any given surface. So I think this is a game changer. That term's a little bit overused, but really, easy iteration by designers and even by the client, that's a really big deal. It took us a long time to get here. We used to be rendering with our CPUs. Well, no, before that we were rendering by hand. That's where I started because I grew up in Los Angeles in the 90s in a super poor high school where we didn't have any computers. Rendering by hand is fun, but if you want to make changes and do iterative design, forget about it. With the advancement of GPUs and real-time technologies, that's all changed, and I think Unreal Engine is kind of the pinnacle of what we can do with those technologies, where we can add customized interactions and really code them to be whatever we want. And you know other software like Lumion and D5 and Twinmotion and Enscape, all those software are great and they make use of real-time software. They solve the problem of speed and being able to render quickly, but they don't offer all the customization that Unreal Engine 5 does to do whatever we want to make high-end interactive experiences. So while I've been blabbering on, you've seen how these things work in the end, but I want to show you how they work within the engine and how easy it is to set it up for other objects within your scene. So here's one of the blueprints right here. Let's just copy it and we'll put it over here, and the box around it is for when you want it, when you run into it. So like that's what triggers the overlap event, that big box there. Okay, so when we run into this, I want to change the couch. So I made a variable that's visible, and so that means here we can change it inside the blueprint without going behind the scenes. So the model we want to change is not this one, but it's the couch. Now the couch, we look at it and we say, okay, element 0 is the one we want to, is the material we want to change here. So we say material index 0 is what we want to change. And then here we can have an array of all the different materials we want to change it to. These don't actually make sense for this particular object, but that's okay. We're just using it as an example. And you can actually set up another group of models, another array of models to change to. So, or we could use it for material index as well, another material index. So we saw on the couch, it's actually material index 0 and 1. So let's also add in number 1 here. So we'll say add a new object to the array, pick the couch again, and this time say material index number 1. Okay. And it's still going to use the same materials for that. Now let's see if that works. That's all we have to do to move this around and do it to other objects in the scene. I hope. Let's see if it works. Okay, as soon as that icon shows up, we can hit tab and it should change our couch. And indeed it does. To very weird materials, but it is working. And then it goes back to the default here, and then you can toggle through the others. That's basically how it works. Pretty easy, but you can see how easy it is to adapt to other objects in the scene. And you can also see, or maybe you know, that this can also be merged into any other Unreal scene you have. So the idea here is setting up a template that works really well for Archviz that can just, as soon as you bring in your Archviz model, you can start placing these blueprints around and making things interactive. I think that's super cool. You let me know what you think about it. Now let's look a little bit into the behind the scenes of how I made this, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds of how this was created because that's a little more than we can talk about in just this short YouTube video. But I have promised that I'd show some of the behind the scenes of how this stuff works. So let's just talk about general principles of what we're doing here. This is just a blueprint, which you can create a blueprint by going here and saying blueprint, blueprint class. Inside the blueprint, BP material change, that's what it is. Inside the blueprint, if we go to edit blueprint, we'll see in here that you have the viewport tab, and all that's in here is the little icon representing a blueprint. But then there's a collision box, which you can add. You can add any component to this. And then I added this little static mesh here, which is a little icon that I made in 3ds Max. And then you can add a text render too. So those are elements that are going to be in the viewport of this blueprint. And the cool thing is that they can be called upon in the event graph too. You can see all those objects are here. So like, for example, I could say drag the static mesh in here and say something like set visibility. So I can do different bits of code in connection with that static mesh. And I can reference them here. All my variables are over here that I can reference. These are like my, let's see, what variables do we have here? So models to change. There's my array of static meshes that I'm collecting to change. Okay, so set up your, and you can see these eyeballs mean that they're accessible inside the game engine, not just inside the blueprint editor here. We saw that already when we were adding the couch to my array, because it was visible to the outside. Okay, and basically what I'm doing here is saying when we begin play here, we're just grabbing that default material so we can go back to it later. We're just collecting it basically and setting a variable equal to that default material. On the overlap, we're basically, so we have on overlap begin and on overlap end. And what that's doing is setting up the visibility of the static mesh that has the little icon on it. And it also sets a variable is active. It sets it to true so that we know we're in a spot. When we overlap that box, we are now in a spot where we can hit tab and we want to do something. So if active is true, is active, true, then we do our code. We set our materials. Okay, so we have that branch, and then over here we have a branch of saying, basically counting the materials in the array. If there's 3 materials in the array and we're on index number 4, then reset to the default material. Okay, so as long as we're within the array, then we set to a new material in that array. And if we go above that array, we go back to the default material. And what we're doing here is just getting our material array that we set in the game engine in there. And for each one of those, we're just toggling through every time we hit tab. And this is the second material I showed you. So it's doing both of them as you hit tab. And then it has basically a counter set up on it. So every time you do it, it counts up 1 in the array and goes to the next one. When you get too high, it then resets and goes to the default material. That's the basic principles of how it's working. But that's basically it. Those are the concepts. And like I said, these arrays are set to a static mesh array, and it's visible, or public is the correct word there. And that means in here, we can actually set what those variables are equal to. So in this array here, we can put as many objects as we want and just eyedrop them. So we could change this chair too. We could change this couch over here. And what that's going to do is just toggle through index material index 0 of all 3 of these meshes with these 3 materials here. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do you like the interactions I've made? And also, if there is a better way to tell the story of your designs, I'd love to know what that is. Do you agree with me that doing it this way is kind of the top of the pyramid? Is this the future of what all Archviz projects will look like because it's so effective? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And in the near future, I'm going to be adding virtual reality to this to make it even more immersive, and we can interact with the environment while standing inside of the environment virtually. That's going to be epic. Make sure to subscribe to catch all of that stuff as it comes out. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.